footprints in the regolith dust told a story that made my skin crawl. They walked toward the ancient road, clear as day. Boot treads from Kowalski's mining gear, each step deliberate and measured. But when they reached that impossible black stone, they turned around. Every last print faced back the way he'd come, as if he'd been walking backward the whole time. Only problem was, Kowalski never walked back. My name is Elena Vasquez, and I've been working the dead moons of the Kepler system for going on 12 years now. I've seen miners lose their minds to void sickness, watched good people get swallowed by cave-ins, and pulled more than my share of frozen corpses from airlocks that failed in the night. But I'd never seen anything like what we found on Kepler 402c. The moon was supposed to be a routine extraction job. Preliminary scans showed heavy concentrations of rare earth minerals just beneath the surface, the kind of find that could set a crew up for life if we played our cards right. The Dust Devil, my ship, had been running on fumes and hope for the better part of 6 months, and my crew was getting restless. When the job posting came through the network, offering a 60-40 split on whatever we pulled from the ground, I didn't hesitate to take it. Should have known better. In this business, when something seems too good to be true, it usually means someone else already died trying to claim it. We made planetfall on a Tuesday, if such things matter in the endless night between stars. The moon hung like a gray pearl against the black, its surface scarred by ancient impacts and newer mining operations that had been abandoned decades ago. The atmosphere was thin enough that we needed suits for surface work, but thick enough to carry sound, which meant you could hear a man scream from a good distance away. My crew was small, but solid. There was Marcus Chen, my engineer and the closest thing I had to a best friend in this godforsaken corner of space. He could coax life from a dead fusion reactor and had hands steady enough to perform surgery, which came in handy more often than you'd think. Sarah Kowalski was our geologist, a quiet woman with sharp eyes who could read rock formations like scripture. And then there was Tommy Reeves, barely 22 and green as summer grass, but eager to prove himself and strong enough to haul twice his weight in ore. We set up base camp in the shadow of a ridge that would shield us from the worst of the solar wind. The work was hard but familiar. Drill, blast, extract, repeat. For the first 3 days, everything went according to plan. We pulled enough high-grade minerals from the ground to make the trip profitable, and the crew was in good spirits. It was Tommy who found the road. He came running back to camp on the morning of the 4th day, his face flushed with excitement behind his helmet's faceplate. "Ms. Vasquez," he said, his voice crackling through the comm. "You need to see this. All of you need to see this." I followed him out past the mining site, Marcus and Sarah trailing behind. The landscape was typical for a dead moon, rolling hills of gray dust punctuated by crater rims and the occasional outcropping of native rock. But as we crested a low rise, I saw what had gotten Tommy so worked up. The road stretched across the valley floor like a black scar, perfectly straight and maybe 20 feet wide. It was made of some kind of stone I'd never seen before, darker than obsidian, and so smooth it seemed to drink in the pale light of the distant sun. The edges were precise, cut with mathematical perfection, and the whole thing had a quality that made my eyes water if I looked at it too long. "How far does it go?" I asked. Tommy pointed toward the horizon. followed it for maybe 2 miles in each direction. Doesn't curve, doesn't break, just keeps going, and there's more of them. He was right. As we climbed higher up the ridge, we could see the pattern. Dozens of roads crisscrossing the moon's surface in a vast geometric grid. They were all the same width, all the same impossible black stone, and they all seemed to converge somewhere beyond the horizon. "Who built this?" Sarah whispered, her voice tight with wonder and fear. That was the question, wasn't it? The moon had been surveyed 6 times over the past century. Every report described it as a lifeless rock with no signs of current or past civilization. Yet here was evidence of construction on a massive scale, engineering that would have challenged the best human architects. "Maybe it's natural," Marcus suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Some kind of volcanic formation we haven't seen before." Sarah was already kneeling beside the road, running her gloved hands over the surface. "This isn't volcanic. Look at the crystalline structure, the way it reflects light. This was manufactured, but I can't identify the material. It's not in any database I know." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the thin atmosphere. In my years working the outer systems, I'd learned to trust my instincts, and every instinct I had was screaming at me to pack up and leave. But the rational part of my mind, the part that worried about fuel costs and crew wages and the mounting debt on the dust devil, kept me rooted in place. "We stick to the mission," I decided. "Mine the ore, fill the hold, get paid. Whatever this is, it's been here for a long time. It can wait a little longer." But curiosity is a powerful thing, and the roads called to us like sirens. During breaks from mining, we found ourselves walking along their edges, following their perfect lines across the desolate landscape. They seemed to pulse with a subtle energy that you could feel through the soles of your boots, a rhythm like a slow heartbeat. It was Sarah who noticed the footprints first. We were working a promising vein about 1/2 mile from the nearest road when she called out over the comm, "Elena, you need to see this." I found her standing at the edge of the black stone, staring down at the dust. There, pressed into the regolith as clear as day, were boot prints. Human boot prints, leading from the mining site to the road and then stopping. "Those are Tommy's boots," Marcus said, joining us. "I'd recognize that tread pattern anywhere." But Tommy was back at the drilling site, visible in the distance as he hauled another load of ore to the processing unit. I called him over the comm. "Tommy, when's the last time you walked over to the road?" "Yesterday morning, I think." "Why?" The prints were fresh. In the thin atmosphere and low gravity of the moon, tracks could last for weeks, without wind to disturb them. But these looked like they'd been made within the hour. "Must be from yesterday," I said, but something about it bothered me. The prints led straight to the road and then simply ended, as if Tommy had stepped onto the black stone and vanished. But that was impossible. Tommy was right there, working the drill like nothing had happened. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my bunk, listening to the hum of the life support systems and the distant sound of the automated mining equipment. Through the porthole, I could see the roads glowing faintly in the starlight, their black surfaces somehow more visible in the darkness than they had been during the day. Around midnight, I heard footsteps outside the habitat module. Slow, measured steps in the regolith dust. I grabbed my suit and helmet, pulling them on as quickly as I could, and stepped outside. The moon moon's surface was bathed in the cold light of distant stars. The mining equipment sat silent and still, our daily quota already met. But there, walking toward the nearest road with the mechanical precision of a sleepwalker, was Sarah. "Sarah!" I called over the comm, but she didn't respond. She just kept walking, her movements stiff and unnatural. I ran after her, my boots kicking up clouds of dust in the low gravity. She reached the edge of the road and stepped onto the black stone. For a moment, she stood there motionless, silhouetted against the star field. Then she turned around, facing back toward the camp, and began walking backward along the road's surface. It was the most unnatural thing I'd ever seen. Her feet moved in perfect reverse, heel to toe, as if someone had taken a recording of normal walking and played it in reverse. But her upper body remained facing forward, her helmet's light cutting through the darkness ahead of her. "Sarah, what are you doing?" I reached the edge of the road, but found I couldn't step onto it. Something invisible held me back, like a force field or a wall of solid air. She continued her backward walk, moving away from me with that horrible mechanical precision. I tried to follow along the road's edge, but she was moving faster than seemed possible, gliding over the black stone like she was on rails. Within minutes, she had disappeared into the darkness. I spent the rest of the night searching, calling her name over the comm, and following the road as far as I dared. But Sarah Kowalski was gone, vanished as completely as if she'd never existed. The only trace of her was a set of footprints in the dust leading to the road, footprints that, like the ones we'd found earlier, faced the wrong direction. When morning came, I woke Marcus and Tommy and told them what I'd seen. They looked at me like I'd lost my mind, and I couldn't blame them. It sounded insane, even to me. "Sarah's in her bunk," Tommy said. "I saw her when I got up to use the head. But when we checked her quarters, we found them empty. Her bed was made, her personal effects were gone, and there was no sign she'd ever been there. Worse, when I tried to describe her to the others, I found the details slipping away from my memory like water through my fingers. I could remember her voice, her expertise with geology, the way she'd knelt beside the road that first day. But her face was already becoming indistinct, as if she was fading from existence itself. "Who are we talking about?" Marcus asked, and the confusion in his voice was genuine. That's when I knew we were dealing with something beyond human understanding. The roads weren't just transportation. They were traps, designed to lure people in and then erase them from reality itself. But why, and who had built them? I wanted to pack up and leave immediately, but Marcus and Tommy insisted we finish the job. We had contracts to fulfill, debts to pay, and without a full hold of ore, the trip would bankrupt us all. Against my better judgment, I agreed to stay for 2 more days. That was my second mistake. The next night, it was Marcus who walked to the road. I watched from the habitat's observation window as he moved across the moonscape with that same mechanical precision, his movement stiff and unnatural. He stepped onto the black stone, turned around, and began his backward journey into oblivion. By morning, he was gone from memory as well as sight. Tommy and I sat in the common area, trying to remember why we'd brought such a large habitat for just the 2 of us, why the ship's engineering station seemed too complex for our small crew. "We should go," I told Tommy. "Something's wrong here." But Tommy was already changing. I could see it in his eyes. A distant look, as if he was listening to something I couldn't hear. He spent long hours staring out at the roads, and when he thought I wasn't looking, he would walk to the edge of the camp and stand there motionless, facing the black stone. On our last night on the moon, I didn't even try to sleep. I sat by the observation window with a cup of coffee and watched Tommy's bunk. Sure enough, around midnight, he rose and began putting on his suit with the slow, deliberate movements of a man in a trance. This time, I was ready. I'd spent the day rigging a tether line from the habitat to the edge of the nearest road, a length of high-tensile cable that could hold a shuttle in a gravity well. If the roads were some kind of trap, maybe I could pull Tommy back before he was lost forever. I followed him outside, keeping my distance as he walked toward the road. When he reached the black stone and stepped onto its surface, I was right behind him with the tether line. I clipped it to his suit's utility harness just as he began to turn around. The moment the line went taut, Tommy stopped. He stood there on the road surface, facing back toward me, but unable to move. I could hear him breathing over the comm, but he didn't speak. His eyes were wide and staring, as if he was seeing something terrible that I couldn't perceive. "Tommy, can you hear me?" I asked. His mouth moved, but no words came out. Then, slowly, he began to speak in a voice that wasn't quite his own. "We built the roads to escape," he said. "When the star began to die, we built the roads to carry us to safety. But safety was an illusion. The roads led nowhere, and we became lost between destinations. Now we wait in the spaces between steps, calling to others to join us in our eternal journey." "Who are you?" I whispered. "We are the architects of the void. We are the ones who walked backward into tomorrow and found only yesterday waiting for us. Join us, Elena Vasquez. Walk the roads and know the peace of purposeless motion." The tether line began to vibrate, then smoke. Whatever force was trying to pull Tommy away was stronger than the cable could withstand. I had maybe seconds before it snapped. "Tommy, fight it!" I shouted. "Remember who you are!" For a moment his eyes cleared. "Elena," he gasped. "The roads, they're not roads at all. They're... The cable snapped with a sound like a gunshot. Tommy turned and began his backward walk into the darkness, moving faster and faster, until he was just a pinpoint of light, disappearing into the void. I stood there alone on the edge of the black stone, surrounded by the footprints of my vanished crew. All of them faced the wrong direction, as if they'd been walking backward from the moment they were made. The roads pulsed with that slow heartbeat rhythm, and I could feel them calling to me. It would be so easy to step onto that perfect black surface, to join my crew in whatever strange limbo they'd found. The loneliness of command, the weight of survival, the endless struggle against an indifferent universe, all of it could end with a single step. But I'd spent 12 years in space, learning to resist temptation, and I wasn't about to give up now. I backed away from the road, keeping my eyes fixed on its surface until I was safely inside the habitat. I spent the rest of the night loading the ore we'd extracted into the Dust Devil's cargo hold. It wasn't a full load, but it was enough to cover our expenses and maybe turn a small profit. As the sun rose over the gray horizon, I fired up the engines and lifted off, leaving the moon and its impossible roads behind. The journey back to civilization took 3 weeks. During that time, I tried to make sense of what had happened, to find some rational explanation for the loss of my crew. But the more I thought about it, the more the details slipped away, like trying to remember a dream after waking. By the time I reached port, I could barely recall their names. Sarah, Marcus, Tommy, they were just shadows in my memory, faces without substance. The only proof they'd ever existed was the crew manifest in my ship's computer and the extra bunks in the habitat module. I sold the ore and paid off my debts, but I couldn't bring myself to take on another crew. How could I trust my memory when it had already failed me once? How could I risk other lives when I didn't fully understand what had happened on that dead moon? Instead, I filed a report with the Colonial Survey Office, marking Kepler 442c as hazardous and recommending it be placed off limits to civilian mining operations. The bureaucrat who processed my claim barely looked up from his screen. "Geological instability?" he asked. "Something like that," I replied. Now I work alone, running small cargo jobs between the inner systems. It's not as profitable as mining, but it's safer. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm drifting between stars, I dream about black roads stretching across empty landscapes. In those dreams, I can see my crew walking backward into infinity, their faces turned toward a destination they'll never reach. And sometimes, just before I wake, I can hear them calling my name. The footprints in my dreams always face the wrong direction, but I've learned not to follow them. Some roads are meant to be walked alone, and some destinations are better left unexplored. In this vast and lonely universe, the greatest danger isn't the void between stars. It's the roads that promise to fill it. I keep flying, carrying cargo from world to world, because motion is life, and stillness is death. The architects of the void built their roads to escape, but they only succeeded in trapping themselves between moments. I won't make their mistake. The stars are destination enough for me.